Today, the housing crisis will be the focus for the Liberals. One option being considered is capping the number of international students allowed into Canada. Housing Minister Sean Fraser says some institutions are taking in far more students than they're able to accommodate.
I think that we need to work very closely with institutions to make sure that they and different levels of government are playing a role to make sure if they're going to continue to bring in record numbers of students, that they are being part of the solution as well by making sure that they have a place to live.
CTV's political correspondent Vassy Kapelos is standing by in Charlottetown for us this morning. Vassy, good morning to you. So the focus is on housing for the Liberals, and there is growing discussion now about the impact of the number of international students coming into this country. What more can you tell us?
Hi, Marcia. Yeah, the discussion is part and parcel with the overall broader talk here that's happening in Cabinet, right next to actually where I'm standing at the moment, around the issue of housing and how unaffordable it is, really from coast to coast to coast. You heard that clip there from newly minted, I should say, Housing Minister Sean Fraser around targets when it comes to international students. He actually previously served in the role of Minister for Immigration. He's now floating the idea of being open to caps on the number of international students here because under the Liberals' tenure, that number has doubled. I think that the new Minister of Immigration, Mark Miller, also referenced that, said it's somewhere around 700,000 students, and that is creating extra demand for rental housing, which is already in short supply. Here's a little bit more from Minister Miller.
700,000 people in this country is a huge number. It's created an ecosystem that is very lucrative for a number of institutions. Some people have quoted up to $30 billion to the economy. A good chunk of that's good. We're training some of the best and brightest people that are coming from across the world. But there is an abuse in the system, and we have to address this in a smart way. It includes potentially looking at a cap, but if we're only looking at a cap, we're only addressing a partial part of that problem and the ecosystem that it's created.
So that's perhaps, Marcia, one part of the puzzle, but it is a gigantic and complicated puzzle. It will form the substance of discussions today. Cabinet ministers are scheduled to hear from a number of experts who penned a report released a few weeks back on potential solutions to addressing the housing crisis. The top solution they're proposing: speed up what you're doing and do different things.
It will be interesting to hear reaction to the idea of capping the number of international students who can come here, Vassy.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because it too is kind of fraught with ramifications, right? Sure, it is something to look at, but my first question is, why wasn't it looked at previously? If in fact the numbers have been increasing as fast as they have, doubling over the last 8 or so years, why wasn't this, when the housing minister was immigration minister, something that was under consideration earlier? Second of all, this is a big revenue stream for colleges and universities. International students, I think most of our viewers will be familiar, are charged a lot more than domestic students.
Yeah.
Universities will have something to say about the decrease to revenue that this could potentially generate. And then also there are questions for universities and colleges about why perhaps their housing development or housing creation on their own campuses or nearby has not kept pace with the speed with which they have been welcoming these international students. So I think you're absolutely right. The reaction is going to be fascinating to this. I think also maybe a bit delayed because all the government's saying right now is we're open to it, not that they're going to do it.
Yeah, it's an option. All right. We also heard from Minister Dominic LeBlanc, Vassy, and he was asked about next steps into the inquiry into foreign interference. What did he say?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening closely to this one because if I recall, I think right when our season was ending in June, this was a very hot topic, right? The former Governor General who was overseeing the process had resigned, and Minister LeBlanc kind of took hold of the file and said, I'm going to be coming back in a week, really, really soon, and I'm going to have details on how whatever comes next actually will unfold. And it seemed like all fingers were pointing towards an inquiry starting. He was going to consult with the opposition. Fast forward months now, not a week or a few weeks, months, and everybody seems to be on a different page. We're hearing from the opposition that they have come to some sort of consensus, that they put forward names, for example, for someone who could lead an inquiry, possible terms of reference. The minister, on the other hand, doesn't seem to think things are moving in the same direction. Have a listen to what he said.
What's important for us is that we're making collaborative progress together. The four recognized political parties in the House of Commons have been working on this since June. We all hoped that this might have been concluded in a final way earlier. But the good news is we're continuing to do the work necessary and optimistic about getting to the right place.
I think it's fair to point out that the question was actually, why isn't it in the right place, not just pronouncing that it isn't in the right place or that things haven't progressed. So we didn't get a really specific answer there. All that's, I think, fair to say or accurate to say at this point is that there is definitely an impasse between the opposition parties and the government. Hasn't been any, a lot, if any, progress made on progressing towards an inquiry or some sort of mechanism to further investigate the issue of foreign interference, and there is most definitely some politics at play here.
All right, before we let you go, they're behind closed doors right now, the ministers, they are meeting. How much are we going to see of them today, Vassy?
We're going to see a lot, actually. They kind of come in and out behind me frequently throughout the day, and so we'll be seeing them do that. We'll be hearing from them, and I'll also be interviewing Housing Minister Sean Fraser to get some more details on what we were talking about a few minutes ago, that potential cap for international students, but also just sort of the housing crisis writ large, the substance of these meetings. If, in fact, there is a new plan or a refresh plan that the government will put forward in the fall, I'm going to be asking him exactly what the government plans to put in that plan.
Vassy, thanks a lot, and we'll stay in close touch with you. Vassy Kapelos in Charlottetown
You bet.
for us this morning.